You remain seated in the small chamber only a little while longer, until the stillness begins to feel less like an ending and more like an invitation, not to leave, but to continue. The pyramid has not revealed everything yet. The chamber around you remains quiet, complete in itself. But something about the air near the far wall feels slightly different, not warmer, not colder, just changed enough that you notice it. You open your eyes fully again. The carved stars above you remain where they were, fixed in stone, untouched by the passing of night outside. The smaller stone structure in the center of the room holds its silence. Nothing here moves, and yet the sense remains. You rise slowly. The sound of your movement is faint, quickly absorbed by the chamber. You walk toward the far wall, where the stone appears smooth at first, uninterrupted. But as you draw closer, a subtle seam becomes visible, a narrow division between two blocks that does not match the others around it. You place your hand against it, cool, firm. Then let your fingers move along the line. There, a slight recess, enough for your hand to press inward. The block does not open suddenly. It shifts with quiet resistance, as if the movement was never meant to be easy. A narrow gap appears, revealing darkness beyond it. You pause only for a moment, then step through. The passage on the other side is narrower than any before. The ceiling lowers further. You instinctively bend your head as you move, one hand against the wall, the other brushing lightly through the air ahead of you. The space feels more hidden, less ceremonial, more private. The air is cooler here. Not by much, but enough to feel the change. You continue slowly. The floor beneath you slopes downward again, more gently than before, but with enough angle that you can sense the deeper interior of the pyramid surrounding you. The stone underfoot is smoother here, more worn. Not by crowds, not by centuries of open use, but by careful passage, repeated in smaller numbers. The tunnel bends sharply, then opens, not into a chamber this time, but into a long corridor. You stop at once. The walls on either side are covered in carvings, not sparse, not faint, dense, ordered. Every surface seems to carry lines, figures, symbols, repeated forms that run from one end of the corridor to the other. You step closer to the wall on your right, letting your eyes adjust to the low light that somehow seems to gather here more easily than it should. A procession of figures moves through the stone. Some carry staffs. Some hold offerings. Some seem to walk toward a seated presence larger than themselves. Others face upward, their arms raised as if in address to something above. You move slowly along the wall, following the sequence. The carvings do not feel decorative. They feel instructive, like a path explained through image, rather than words. There are boats carved here too, long, narrow, gliding across bands of stone that suggest water. Within them stand figures with still, formal posture. Above them, signs repeat: birds' eyes, staffs, stars. Forms you do not fully understand and do not need to. What matters is the rhythm, the procession, the journey, the sense that this corridor is not merely a hallway between spaces. It is part of the space itself, a transition recorded in stone. You continue forward. The corridor extends farther than expected, and the carvings continue with almost no interruption. In some places, the figures are larger, more detailed. In others, they simplify into symbols, as if moving between narrative and pattern. The silence remains complete, but now it feels populated, not by sound, by intention, by the presence of those who designed this place to mean something beyond shelter, beyond burial, beyond stone. At the halfway point, the corridor widens slightly, enough to create a shallow alcove on one side. Within it stands a low stone platform, and above that, another carved panel unlike the others. This one is centered around a single seated figure, calm and symmetrical, hands resting on knees, face turned outward in profile. Above the figure arches a wide band of stars. Below, wave-like lines, sky and water, above and below. You stand there for some time. The image feels balanced in a way that resists interpretation. It does not explain itself. It only remains. Then you notice something else. At the base of the panel, cut into the stone more deeply than the surrounding carvings, are a series of shallow, circular depressions. Small, evenly spaced. Their purpose is not immediately clear. You kneel, touch one of them. The stone inside feels smoother, more polished than the rest, as if fingers had once returned to these same places again and again. Ritual, perhaps. Sequence. Contact repeated over time. You rise again and continue down the corridor. Gradually, the imagery begins to change. The boats disappear. The seated figures become fewer. Now the walls show stars more frequently, arranged in rows, clusters, diagonal patterns. Between them stand slender human forms facing upward. Some hold measuring rods. Others point toward shapes above them. It is not difficult to sense what this part of the corridor is doing. The pyramid is no longer only speaking of passage through enclosed space. It is speaking of the sky, of alignment, of orientation beyond the earth. You remember the night outside before you entered, the first stars over the desert, the clean darkness above the pyramid. How fixed they seemed, how eternal. Here, beneath the stone, that same sky has been brought inward, not as imitation, as continuation. The corridor ends at last in another chamber. This one is taller than the last, but narrower than the first. The ceiling angles upward sharply, meeting high above in a pointed shape that pulls your gaze with it. There are no star carvings here, no figures, only plain stone rising to a narrow apex. The emptiness of the walls changes the feeling immediately. After so much imagery, so much carved instruction, this chamber feels stripped down, reduced to shape, scale, silence. At the center stands a polished block of dark stone. Not large, not ornate, but different. It reflects almost no light. You circle it slowly. The floor around it is marked with faint linear cuts, almost like a grid, though uneven, oriented toward the corners of the chamber. You crouch slightly to see them better. They seem too deliberate to be accidental, too subtle to be decorative. You follow one line outward with your eyes. It leads toward one wall, where a narrow slit has been cut high into the stone. You straighten. There is another slit on the opposite side, and another. Small openings, almost invisible, unless you are looking for them. You step back, and the room reveals itself differently. This chamber was not only built to enclose, it was built to receive. Light, perhaps, at certain hours, on certain nights, through certain stars. The thought settles slowly, calmly. You imagine the sky outside moving across the long darkness of the desert, while, at precise moments, narrow beams entered here, touching floor, wall, stone, creating a sequence only visible to those who waited in silence. The pyramid as clock, as map, as instrument, not simply monument. You remain there, looking upward toward the slits, imagining the invisible geometry connecting night sky to inner chamber. There is a kind of peace in that precision, a quiet intelligence, not modern, not mechanical, something slower, more patient, something that accepts that meaning can unfold over years, over seasons, over stars, returning to the same place Again and again. You sit again, this time beside the dark stone at the center. The chamber feels different from the others. Less ceremonial than the corridor. Less intimate than the lower room. More exact, as if designed for attention, for waiting. You rest your hand on the floor and feel the coolness of the stone pass into your skin. The silence remains, but your awareness is active now, moving not outward in urgency, but gently from one detail to the next. The angled ceiling, the narrow light slits, the dark stone, the floor lines. A room designed around relationship, not decoration. After some time, you rise once more. There is another opening beyond the chamber, this one partly concealed behind the angle of the far wall. You move toward it, and the air shifts again as you approach. Softer, drier. The passage beyond is level, neither ascending nor descending. It feels older somehow, though the same stone surrounds you. Less carved, less polished, more raw. You enter. This new passage is wider, allowing you to walk upright without bending. The walls bear only occasional marks now, more like isolated symbols than full scenes. A bird, a line of 3 stars, a hand, a reed. Then nothing for several steps. The reduction in imagery changes your pace. You move slower, not because the passage is difficult, because each mark feels more deliberate by being alone, separated, placed, as if whatever lies ahead requires less explanation. The floor here is covered in a fine layer of dust, undisturbed except where the stone rises slightly in shallow ridges. Your footsteps leave no visible mark, yet you sense the delicacy of the surface, the long stillness it has known. Then, faintly, the passage begins to widen. Not all at once, gradually. The air opens. The darkness, it changes shape. And ahead, a dim silver-grey tone appears where there should be none. You stop. It is not lamplight, not reflected fire. It is softer than that, colder. You continue toward it, slowly. And the passage opens at last, into a chamber, unlike any before. This one is not fully enclosed. High above, too far to touch, a shaft opens toward the outside world. It is narrow enough that no full view of the sky is visible, but wide enough for moonlight to descend in a pale column through the center of the room. You stand still as your eyes adjust. The light falls onto the floor in a perfect shape, illuminating a circular section of stone and leaving the rest of the chamber in layered shadow. Dust moves within the beam, not from wind. There is almost none, just the natural slow drift of fine particles suspended in still air, visible only because the moon has found them. The effect is immediate. After so much darkness, the light feels almost liquid, poured downward from the desert sky, brought into the heart of the pyramid. You step into the edge of the beam and look upward. You cannot see the moon itself, only the shaft through which it speaks to the room below. This chamber was built for this moment, for night, for a certain angle of sky, for the desert above to enter in silence. Along the circular lit area on the floor are more carvings, but these are arranged differently. Around the beam runs a ring of symbols, each spaced carefully from the next. Stars, birds, curved lines, seated figures, boats again, reeds, eyes, a cycle, a circle rather than a procession. You walk slowly around it. The moonlight remains steady in the center, but the ring around it invites movement, one symbol after another, a sequence without obvious beginning or end. You imagine someone years ago standing where you now stand, not speaking, simply watching as light fell from above and made the carved circle visible for a brief portion of the night. Not spectacle, not theater. Attention, patience, alignment. This is what the pyramid begins to feel like now. Not a place of mystery in the modern sense, but a place built for deliberate experiences of quiet, of dark and light, of enclosure and orientation, of stillness long enough for the smallest change to become meaningful. You lower yourself to the floor at the edge of the illuminated circle. The moonlight does not reach you fully. Only its boundary does. A pale edge across the stone near your hand. You rest there, and for the first time since entering the pyramid, you feel the outside world return. Not in sound, not in wind, but in light alone. The desert sky above, the moon crossing in silence, the stars beyond it. All still present, all still moving, even while the rooms below remain motionless. This gives the entire journey a new shape. You did not leave the outside behind when you entered. You carried it inward, step by step, until it returned transformed, through carvings, through alignment, through shafts of light, through ceilings of stars cut into stone. You close your eyes for a moment, not to end the scene, just to let it settle. The cool floor beneath you, the pale moonlight nearby, the unbroken silence, the depth of the pyramid around you. There is still more ahead. But now the world inside and the world above have finally met. You remain at the edge of the moonlit circle, letting the quiet expand around you without closing into repetition. The beam above does not flicker. It simply descends, steady and pale, holding its place within the chamber, as if the room had been waiting for it all along. After a while, you open your eyes again. The symbols around the circle seem clearer now, not because the light has changed, but because your attention has. You trace them one by one with your gaze. A star, a bird with folded wings, a reed, a seated figure, a boat. Then the sequence shifts and begins to vary, repeating certain forms while changing others. You rise slowly and begin to walk the ring more carefully. At one point, the carvings deepen slightly, and you notice that the seated figure is no longer alone. Another smaller form stands before it, arms raised. At another point, the boat carries not one figure, but several. In one section, the stars are arranged in a line. In another, they arc. This is not random decoration. It feels like a cycle within a cycle, a story told in recurrence rather than in straight progression. You continue around the circle until you reach the far side of the chamber, where the moonlight fades back into shadow. The wall here is plain at first, but lower down, near the floor, a narrow recess cuts inward. You crouch to look more closely. Inside the recess lies a shallow stone tray, empty now, but its placement beneath the edge of the light suggests a purpose. Perhaps offerings once rested here, perhaps water, oil, small objects placed not for storage, but for timing, for certain nights, certain positions of the moon, certain returns of the stars. The idea feels quiet and exact. You stand again and look upward toward the shaft. It is impossible to see far, yet the existence of that opening changes everything. The pyramid is no longer a sealed interior. It is a structure of relationships, stone and sky, chamber and season, darkness and calculated light. You take a slow breath, then turn toward another opening you had not noticed at first. It lies beyond the circle, partly hidden in shadow, narrower than the passage you came through. You move toward it carefully. The floor changes underfoot here, becoming slightly smoother, as if many hands or many feet once paused at this threshold. You enter. This passage is short. It bends once, then opens abruptly into a room unlike the others. The chamber is low and wide, its walls covered not with formal processions or star patterns, but with rows of carefully carved objects, jars, chests, stools, fans, sandals, necklaces, headrests, boats in miniature, offerings of bread and birds and flowers. You stop almost immediately. The space feels intimate, domestic, not because it resembles a home, but because it preserves the shape of daily life. Everything here is rendered with attention, as if what mattered was not only the passage into eternity, but the memory of ordinary existence brought along with it. A chair, a box, a jar sealed against dust, a bed prepared for rest. The objects are not chaotic. They are ordered, catalogued, made permanent. You move slowly along one wall, a carved chest with carefully indicated hinges, a folded garment represented in lines of stone, a vessel with handles. Then on another wall, scenes of preparation. People grinding grain, pouring liquids, arranging offerings, carrying baskets, fanning the air. The pyramid opens further. It is no longer only about kings or stars or sealed silence. It is about continuity, about bringing the textures of life into stillness. You trace the outline of one carved jar with your hand. The shape is simple, but unmistakably familiar. A container made to hold something necessary. Water, oil, grain, all the small things that sustain life, translated now into permanence. The chamber seems to say, nothing important is too ordinary to preserve. You remain there for a while, letting that idea settle. Outside, in the desert, the night continues. The moon moves, the stars arc, the sand cools further before dawn. Inside, these walls hold the patient record of a world that refused to vanish simply because it entered stone. At the far end of the room is another panel, larger than the others. Here, a meal is depicted in careful detail. Loaves, bowls, fruit, birds prepared for eating. Figures seated in still composure, not in conversation, but in ritual presence. The table itself becomes central, almost architectural. You realize then that the pyramid is not reducing the world. It is reorganizing it, taking life apart into its essential forms and reassembling them within a timeless structure. The corridors spoke of passage. The star chamber spoke of alignment. This room speaks of continuation. You turn slowly and let your eyes move across the walls one last time before returning to the passage. Back in the moonlit chamber, the pale column still falls from above, but now it feels different, less mysterious, more connected. Another part of the same system: light, objects, rituals, stars, stories. Each room a different register of the same long thought. You pass through the moonlit space and continue into a new opening on the opposite side. This one slopes upward. The shift is immediate. After descending deeper and deeper into enclosed stillness, the subtle ascent changes your body first, then your awareness. The air becomes very slightly lighter, not warmer, just less dense. The passage rises in long, gradual angles, interrupted by small landings where the walls widen enough to create shallow niches. Within these niches stand no statues, no visible offerings, only plain stone surfaces worn smooth in the center. You pause at one. The smoothness suggests touch, repeated touch. Hands resting there, a pause point in the ascent. You place your own hand there for a moment, cool, polished by time rather than by tools. Then you continue upward. Eventually the passage opens into a tall gallery. The ceiling rises sharply overhead in stepped layers, each course of stone slightly projecting inward above the one below. The effect draws your gaze upward at once, not toward a single point, but along a sequence of narrowing plongs that lead the eye into height. The floor is long and straight, the walls plain. There are no carvings here at all, only structure, only geometry. You begin to walk through it. Your footsteps return more clearly in this gallery than anywhere else in the pyramid. Not loudly, but with a distinct echo that travels ahead and back again, reminding you of the scale of the space. It feels ceremonial without needing images. The sheer precision of the room becomes its language. Halfway through, you stop and look back. The entrance below seems smaller now, framed by the length of the floor and the layers above. Ahead, another opening waits at the far end, darker than the space around it. This gallery feels transitional in a different way than the carved corridors. Not narrative, preparatory. A place that strips away image and object and leaves only a scent. You resume walking. At the end of the gallery, the passage narrows once more and leads into a chamber smaller than the gallery, but larger than the domestic room. This one is empty, completely. No carvings, no central structure, no visible shaft. Just a rectangular room of clean stone surfaces, exact and spare. At first it seems to offer nothing. Then you notice the sound. Or rather, the absence of it. This chamber absorbs echo more fully than the gallery behind you. The emptiness creates a different kind of silence, one that feels deliberate. The room exists not to display, but to clear. You stand in its center. And after all the other spaces, the symbolic, the carved, the aligned, the domestic, you begin to understand this room as an intentional pause, a void in the sequence, a place where nothing is added, only space, only stillness, only the mind meeting bare stone without guidance. You remain there longer than expected. There is a kind of relief in the simplicity of it. No images to follow, no meanings suggested, just containment. After some time, your attention shifts to the far wall, where a narrow horizontal seam runs across the lower third of the stone. You move closer. The line is subtle, but unlike a crack, too straight, too intentional. Kneeling, you see that beneath the seam, a thin draft of cooler air barely touches your skin, a place that strips away image and object and leaves only a scent. You resume walking. At the end of the gallery, the passage narrows once more and leads into a chamber smaller than the gallery, but larger than the domestic room. This one is empty, completely. No carvings, no central structure, no visible shaft. Just a rectangular room of clean stone surfaces, exact and spare. At first, it seems to offer nothing. Then you notice the sound, or rather the absence of it. This chamber absorbs echo more fully than the gallery behind you. The emptiness creates a different kind of silence, one that feels deliberate. The room exists not to display, but to clear. You stand in its center, and after all the other spaces, the symbolic, the carved, the aligned, the domestic, you begin to understand this room as an intentional pause, a void in the sequence, a place where nothing is added, only space, only stillness, only the mind meeting bare stone without guidance. You remain there longer than expected. There is a kind of relief in the simplicity of it. No images to follow, no meaning suggested, just containment. After some time, your attention shifts to the far wall, where a narrow horizontal seam runs across the lower third of the stone. You move closer. The line is subtle, but unlike a crack, too straight, too intentional. Kneeling, you see that beneath the seam, a thin draft of cooler air barely touches your skin. The edges are worn smooth. It may once have held water, or oil, or perhaps reflected light brought in by hand. You imagine a flame placed there, a single small light in this enclosed room, sending shadows of the 7 figures across the walls. The thought remains with you. You rise and look at them again. There is something calming in their symmetry, a sense of being accompanied without being addressed, a room for presence rather than action. You sit down at the edge of the circular depression. By now, the pyramid has unfolded through distinct languages. The desert outside offered scale. The first chamber offered silence. The star room offered orientation. The moon shaft offered connection to the living sky. The object room offered memory of daily life. The gallery offered ascent. The empty chamber offered clearing. And this room offers companionship in stillness, not human warmth, not narrative comfort, something older, more formal. The sense that rest, observation, and passage need not be solitary. You let your gaze move slowly from one figure to the next until the distinctions between them soften and their arrangement becomes a rhythm rather than a series. One, then another, then another. Steady, unmoving, complete. After a while, you close your eyes. The room remains vivid in your awareness, even without sight. The circle at your feet, the silent figures in the walls, the weight of stone around you, the long journey inward that brought you here. But now, at last, the movement can begin to soften, not because there is nothing left to discover, but because the pyramid has shown enough of itself to let you stop searching. The world above continues. The moon moves. The stars turn. The desert cools toward the hour before dawn, and deep within the pyramid, surrounded by stone, symbol, memory, geometry, and quiet company, you begin to rest inside all of it at once. You remain seated in the chamber of silent figures, letting everything you've seen settle, without needing to move further. The space does not ask you to continue. It does not guide you onward. It simply holds you there. The presence of the figures around you feels steady, unchanging, not watching in a way that creates tension, but present in a way that removes it. Your breathing slows again, in and out, soft, even. The air remains cool, still, untouched by any movement beyond your own. There is no sound here, not even the faint echo you heard in the gallery above. Everything is absorbed, contained. The circular depression beside you reflects nothing now. No light reaches this chamber. No connection to the outside sky remains here. And yet, you do not feel cut off. You feel complete, as if everything you passed through, the desert, the stars, the chambers, the carvings, the light, has gathered here, not physically, but in awareness. Nothing is missing. You remain there for a while longer. Time softens again, not disappearing, but losing its edges. The difference between moments becomes less clear. Everything blends into one continuous presence. Eventually, without urgency, you open your eyes. The figures remain, exactly as they were, unmoved. You stand slowly. There is no hesitation now, no sense of searching, only a quiet understanding that the path does not continue deeper. It turns. You take one last look around the chamber. The 7 figures. The smooth floor. The still air. Then you move toward the passage you entered through. The low corridor feels familiar now, less confined, less unknown. You pass through it carefully, returning to the empty chamber beyond. The space feels different this time. Not empty, but calm, clear. You cross it slowly and step back into the gallery. The height of it feels larger now. The echo of your steps returns but softer, less defined, as if your awareness no longer follows it outward. You walk the length of it, unhurried. The passage downward appears again, and you follow it, back through the corridor of sparse markings, back through the chamber of objects, back through the moonlit room. The light has shifted slightly, not dramatically, but enough to notice. The beam is no longer centered exactly where it was. The sky above has moved. You pause briefly at the edge of the circle, then continue. The pyramid does not feel like a place you are leaving. It feels like something you are moving through again, in a different direction. The path unfolds naturally. The corridor of carvings appears once more. The figures, the boats, the stars. They remain as they were, but now they feel quieter, more distant. Not because they have changed, but because you have. You move through them without stopping, without needing to trace every line again. The chamber above returns. The first one, wide, still, familiar. The opening beyond it, the passage, the slope. You continue, step by step. The air begins to change again, subtly at first, then more clearly, less still, less enclosed. The faintest trace of movement returns, the memory of wind, of space, of distance. The entrance appears ahead, not suddenly, but gradually, a faint outline, then a shape, then an opening, and finally, the desert. You step out. The night has changed. The sky is lighter now, not yet day, but close. The stars begin to fade, one by one. The air is cool, fresh, open. You take a slow breath. The space around you expands instantly. After the stillness of the pyramid, the desert feels vast, endless. The pyramids stand behind you, unmoved, silent, holding everything within them exactly as before. You turn slightly, looking at them one last time. They do not change. They do not reveal more. They simply remain, as they always have, as they always will. You begin to walk, slowly, across the sand. The light continues to rise. The horizon softens. The first hints of morning approach, and with each step, the journey settles. Not ending, not disappearing, but becoming part of something larger, something steady, something that continues without needing to be followed. You walk until the pyramids grow smaller behind you, until the desert opens fully ahead, until the sky begins to take on the first true color of dawn. And then, without effort, without thought, everything settles into quiet again. Not the deep stillness of stone, not the enclosed calm of chambers, but the open, endless calm of a world returning to light. And within that calm, you rest. You continue walking across the sand, though now each step feels lighter, less defined, as if the need to move is slowly fading on its own. The desert opens fully around you. No walls, no corridors, no chambers holding the air still. Only space, wide, endless. The sky continues to brighten, but gently, without urgency. The deep blue softens into something lighter, and the last few stars fade quietly, without drawing attention to their departure. The air is cool, clear. You breathe in slowly, and out. The wind returns, soft at first, then steady, moving across the sand in low, even patterns, shaping the surface in ways that are almost too subtle to notice, unless you remain still. You slow your steps, then stop. There is no need to continue forward, no destination ahead. The journey has already unfolded. Everything has already been seen. The pyramids behind you remain where they are, distant now, but unchanged. Their presence no longer pulls your attention. They exist, but without demand. You stand quietly. The horizon stretches in every direction. Nothing interrupts it. Nothing breaks it. Only a gradual shift in light as morning approaches. Your breathing settles again, in and out, even, soft. There is no urgency left in it, no sense of time pressing forward. Only a steady rhythm that continues without effort. The memory of the pyramid, the chambers, the carvings, the silence. All of it remains somewhere behind you, but not as something separate. It feels integrated now, part of the same stillness, part of the same calm. You close your eyes slowly. The warmth of the coming day has not yet arrived. Only the cool remains, balanced, gentle. The wind moves across your skin without resistance. The ground beneath your feet holds you without movement. There is no need to adjust, no need to shift. Everything is already at rest. The sounds are minimal, the faint movement of air. Nothing more. Your awareness softens again, not fading completely, but becoming lighter, less focused. The difference between standing and resting begins to dissolve, between movement and stillness, between here and there. There is only presence, the same quiet presence that followed you through the pyramid, through the chambers, through the stone, now expanded into something open and without boundaries. The sky continues to brighten behind your closed eyes, but you do not follow it. You remain where you are, within the calm that does not change, within the stillness that no longer deepens because it is already complete. Your breathing continues, slower, quieter, until it feels almost like part of the wind itself, moving, then still, moving again, then still. There is nothing left to observe, nothing left to follow, only rest, only calm, only the quiet continuation of everything, without needing to move forward, without needing to return, without needing to hold on to anything at all. And within that calm, you remain. The calm remains, steady and complete, holding everything exactly where it is. There is no longer a sense of movement, no path to follow, no place to reach. The desert stretches around you, but you do not need to see it. You feel its openness without needing to observe it. The sky continues to brighten, but it does so quietly, without asking for your attention. Your breathing continues, soft, even, in and out. It blends into everything else now, no longer separate, no longer something to notice. Just part of the same quiet rhythm that surrounds you. The wind moves gently, then settles, then moves again, without pattern, without urgency. The air remains cool, balanced between night and day, holding that brief moment where nothing fully changes, yet everything has already begun to. You feel no need to move, no need to think. The journey has completed itself. The desert, the pyramid, or the chambers, the silence, all of it has unfolded and now rests without needing to continue. Your awareness softens further. The edges of thought dissolve. The sense of time disappears. There is no before, no after. Only this quiet presence, complete, unchanging. The world continues, but it does so without reaching you now. It moves in its own rhythm while you remain in stillness, held gently within a calm that asks for nothing. Your breathing slows, becomes lighter, until even that feels distant, barely there. Everything settles, fully, completely. There is nothing left to follow, nothing left to hold, only rest, only stillness, only the quiet, endless calm where everything has already happened, and nothing more is needed. And within that calm, you drift, gently, effortlessly, into the final quiet stillness of the night.